I don't think he has much. I don't think he has much. The last I noticed, he has not succeeded in creating even his own apparatus. Then apparently there are some people who have ties just to him. He's a completely dependent figure because he was elected because Putin chose him. He then turned around immediately and chose Putin. All of this was obviously set up in advance. And under those circumstances, it's very hard for me to imagine that he's able to exert himself. Every step of his career has been the result of the patronage of Putin. I believe Putin is clever enough that the scenario of possible betrayal has been worked out many, many times, and adequate measures are in place to prevent that from happening.
I'm sure that Putin has far more control, and you can say that it's still two-thirds Putin and one-third Medvedev, but there is some Medvedev, and it appears to me that Medvedev is operating in his leeway more by allowing other people saying things that are more radical beneath him than by doing it himself. So he doesn't take the lead in the discussion. His own statements are most of the time amazingly boring, but he has a lot of exciting people behind him, particularly led by Igor Jurgens, the head of his think tank. And one can see that the liberal Russian economists are very much gearing towards Medvedev, while they are totally excluded of Putin, St. Petersburg KGB camp. So we are seeing a division of Russian elite into two major parts, and one is gravitating towards Medvedev, and the other is firmly composed around Putin.
Well, I mean, I think again, you have an issue in Russia, as in other countries, of rhetoric versus reality. And Mr. Medvedev kind of, in a certain way, solves a public relations problem for the Kremlin, which is that Mr. Putin had become a very unpopular and quite feared person. So by changing the rhetoric, having a new face with a different way of behaving, a much less threatening, a much more friendly and conciliatory tone, but keeping the same policies in effect, you actually, at least for a while, are able to engage Western leaders in the hope that maybe something positive is changing in Russia. And after all, Mr. Medvedev has been, I mean, his earlier position was as the head of Gazprom. Not as the CEO of Gazprom, but he was on the board of Gazprom. He is a part of the elite, both in the political and in the economic sense, and he has the same interest as the rest of the regime in this situation.
I think Medvedev is a work in progress. He definitely has his own team. Unfortunately for his team, all the key positions, the majority of the key positions in Russia, are controlled by people who don't share the ideology of the Medvedev team. So there are real differences in terms of individuals and in terms of personal interests of these people in the teams. Having said that, Dmitry Medvedev did not change some key power position. Having said that, Dmitry Medvedev has not changed key office holders who remain Vladimir Putin's people. I'm talking about Igor Sechin, the deputy prime minister in charge of oil and gas. I'm talking about key military positions, key chairmanships of large state-owned companies. And until such time as these will remain Putin loyalists, Vladimir Putin is going to be the one who is calling the shots in Russia. That is not to say that there's some massive disagreement between Putin and Medvedev, but the two men belong to two different generations. They belong to different parts of the elite. Putin is very much a product and a representative of the security elite, and Medvedev is a product and a representative of the business and law such as it is in Russia. And because of that, I do believe that Medvedev still is a number 2 person. And then the question arises, when foreign leaders go to Russia or try to deal with Russia, who they really need to talk to. Do they need to talk to Medvedev or they need to talk to Putin?
It's the beginning that there are 2 things people have forgotten predicting that he's going to be just a puppet. The first is people like being president. If Dmitry Medvedev doesn't like being president, his wife clearly does. Valentina clearly does. And I think, the statements we've seen in recent weeks, I am the president, he's only the prime minister, tell you a lot. The second thing is Russians have never been comfortable with divided power of any kind. And therefore they are increasingly looking away from Putin and to Medvedev. And let us be clear, in the Russian political firmament, the prime minister is responsible for the economy and the president is responsible for foreign policy. Well, in recent days, in recent months, guess which sector's been doing better? And not surprisingly, you see Russians deferring or increasingly saying positive things about Medvedev. That Russians enjoy Putin in some ways, in contrast to Yeltsin, one understands. One doesn't like, but one understands. But I think Mr. Putin is not going to be the puppet master in this. I think this is a fluid situation, and that's why I say there's at least a possibility that Medvedev could take over and Putin could go somewhere or not be with us. Russia being Russia.